Present.
Mr. Ploger?
Present.
Ms. Simulton?
Present.
Ms. Swanson?
Also present.
All right, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4.1 is our April Pride winners. So at this time, I'd ask the board to please join me up front as we recognize and congratulate our Pride Award winners for the month of April.
Okay, tonight, the Board of Education acknowledges the Pride winners for the month of April. Pride stands for Proudly Recognizing Individuals Demonstrating Excellence. The Board of Education implemented this program in the fall of 2015 to recognize, promote, and celebrate the many contributions made by the teachers and employees across the district. Teachers of the Month are sponsored by Allied First Bank. This recognizes what our teachers do day in and day out for the continued growth and success of our students. Awardees, as your name is called, please come forward to be congratulated by the board and Dr. Sparlin. Congratulations to the following teachers for having been recognized as April Teachers of the Month. Vanessa Fehrenbacher, a second grade dual language teacher at Boulder Hill Elementary. Mary Hardy, a special education teacher at Oswego High School. Anna Hogue, a German teacher at Oswego East High School. And Julia Stokel, a K-5 instructional coach at Lakewood Creek Elementary School. Congratulations, teachers, and at this time we invite the building administrators to join us up front with the teachers, the board, and Dr. Sparlin for a photo. Hold on, Cindy, where is Ryan? Congratulations. The next, no, we're not done yet. The next awardees this evening are the April Employees of the Month, which is co-sponsored by Chick-fil-A and Huntington Learning Center. This award is given in appreciation of employees who go above and beyond and are always willing to lend a hand. Awardees, as your name is called, please come forward to be congratulated by the board and Dr. Sparlin. Congratulations to the following employees for having been named April Employees of the Month. Amy Bales, a special education teaching assistant at Eastview Academy. And Jenny Long, a security dean's assistant at Oswego High School. Congratulations to our employees. At this time, if there's any building administrators here, you can join the employees and board with Dr. Sparlin for a photo. Congratulations, employees. We'd like to remind our community that the district does have an open nomination process, which can be found on the district's website. We thank our generous district partners, Allied First Bank, Chick-fil-A, Huntington Learning Center, and Culver's for helping make this program a success. Thank you.
They're all gone.
5.1, public comment. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the board this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. No discussion of personnel matters or responses to questions are permitted. The board does not participate in discussion during public comment. If your questions or concerns require follow-up, a member of the administration will reach out through the contact information provided on the comment card. Thank you.
Jacqueline Bias.
I'm going to put it down. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Jacqueline Bies, and I live on Grapevine Trail in Oswego. My husband and I are parents of 3 children in 3 different 308 schools. 2 of our children have special needs and are in self-contained special education classrooms. Our boys are currently in 5th, 7th, and 8th grade, Hunt Club, Thompson, and over at Plank. I'm also a special education bilingual teacher in a neighboring school district. My husband and I are also on the board for EPIC 308, Exceptional Parents of Exceptional Children. You become involved and become an advocate when something matters to you. I want to thank you all for being part of the 308 Board of Education, as you have all found a reason to become advocates for the students, teachers, and parents, and all community members. Before I became an educator, my husband and I had to learn how to navigate the world of special education alone. There were so many obstacles, acronyms, learning curves, and walls that go up when you have children with special needs. Throughout our many years of special education services that our children have received in the school district, some have been good, some have been supportive, and some have not. I'm here today to ask you to thoughtfully consider when parents reach out to school administrators for support, such as one-on-one aides to support them. Have you visited the junior high, high school, and elementary special education classrooms? Have you had candid conversations with the educators and support staff within those classrooms? Do they feel supported by their administration? Do parents feel supported by the administration? Are students truly receiving what they need in order to work towards their highest potential? Are your teachers and paraprofessionals receiving what they need to support each and every special education student? How is this information shared without resentment or retaliation? I don't typically ask for more than what I think my children need or legally deserve. An IEP is a legally binding document that is supposed to be followed by all staff who work with that child. However, have you given thought to what happens when there isn't enough staff to support that child's legally binding document? This is happening every day in our school district. We recently requested a one-on-one aide to help support our middle son during the school day. We were questioned as to why now? Why now in 7th grade would he need a one-on-one aide when he never required one before? We were warned that just because we asked for a one-on-one aide, that he may not receive one. We were warned that there was a shortage of paraprofessionals. The pandemic affected some students more than others. If you know anything about autism, you know that children and adults with autism thrive on structure. I'm here to ask that you consider what is happening in special education within your schools, within our schools. Why is there a shortage of paraprofessionals? Can we do better as a district to support your overworked, overstressed, and underappreciated special education teachers and staff. What can we do to address recruitment and retention of
Thank
our
you.
paraprofessionals?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will send the letter since I didn't get to finish.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Michelle Traeger.
Thank you, Jackie. Nice job.
Hi, I'm Michelle Traeger, again, parent of 4 in the district. I'm going to talk fast, and I know that I emailed you, so you should have this information and the relevant cited studies. I'm asking the school board for 3 things. 1, a plan for raising awareness and training our educators about FASD and neurobehavioral informed approaches. 2, to plan to make the month of September FASD awareness as it is nationally. And 3, to contact our representatives and senators and ask them to co-sponsor the FASD Respect Act, which will help provide funding, guidance, and infrastructure to contribute to the aforementioned training. There are provisions through the Department of Education in that bipartisan proposed legislation. The exciting news that I have to share is that parents and advocates have been meeting with Representative Underwood's office, along with other legislators' offices. Last Wednesday afternoon, Representative Underwood called me herself to say that she had signed on as a co-sponsor. That's how important this is. It's crucial we get as many co-sponsors as possible so the bill can even get called out of committee to be voted on. As a school district, we should send her a note of thanks for doing this. And we should contact Representative Foster and Senators Duckworth and Durbin and ask them to do so as well. Again, FASD impacts 1 in 20 people, which is 2.5 times the rate of autism. In a district of 17,000 students, that's about 850 students. Over 90% of individuals with FASD will develop comorbid mental health conditions. As far as the training, I want to tell you that in February, I was invited to present about FASD at the Illinois Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders. I didn't see anyone from our district there. In March, I was invited to present about FASD to the Macon Piet, which is Decatur Special Education District, as part of their Professional Development Day. Other districts and other entities that serve educators and children are recognizing how important this is. When the school board talks about the importance of mental health and the importance of SEL, the concern about suicidal ideation in our students, it is lip service unless we acknowledge FASD. When the board talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is lip service unless we acknowledge our students with the highest needs and most severe disabilities, and unless we acknowledge FASD, which occurs across all socioeconomic statuses, all education levels, all races, all ethnicities, all orientations, and all cultures in which alcohol is a part of life. If we say we are a trauma-informed district, it is lip service unless we truly understand how trauma affects the development of the brain, including FASD, which is a prenatal trauma. And there I am with time to spare. Since I didn't email our student ambassadors, I did print out these sources because this is great information for them to have and to understand how the political process works as well.
Thank you.
Rachael Koenig.
I tried.
Good evening. My name is Rachael Koenig. I've already emailed all of you on the board and the administration, but I just wanted to read a good portion of my email for the record. First of all, I want to thank all of you for what you do. This is not an easy job. It is not easy to be in front of all of these people, and not everybody brings their empathy with them to every board meeting, and I really do appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge the administration because it's tough right now. It's tough to be a parent in this current climate of the world, and it's tough to actually educate children during this time. So the mental and emotional and psychological and physical labor that you all put in is not lost on me and many of us. I wanted to speak just because first of all, I have 2 SD308 students, one at OHS, a freshman, and one at Trauber Junior High School, who's in grade 7. They've been in this district their entire educational lives. Their father and I moved here almost 16 years ago from the city of Chicago, so we aren't from here, but we've been here long enough to understand the dynamics of this community. My reason for speaking today is just to express my concern regarding the challenges to curriculum, programs, and even the books in our school libraries. There is a censorship attempt going on right now that includes redaction, restriction, relocation, and removal. There are inflammatory accusations being lodged against teachers and librarians. And there is an opposition to representation within the curriculum that, for me, is unsettling at best. I am very much aware, as are many parents, that any student can have access to the internet and read or view absolutely everything that we have been talking about, including books and materials on any list circulating anywhere. I also know that our children know more now than we did when we were their age, and they know more now than we do right now. It's, as I said, it's not easy to parent during this time. My concern is to make sure our kids are as informed and empathetic as possible, including learning actual history, recognizing and respecting differences, and practicing inclusion. I'm concerned about our district's AP status if the censorship gets out of hand. And I'm concerned about our district losing money to frivolous legal challenges when there are so many more important issues and causes that matter to our kids and their future. I ask that the board allow the SD308 administration, teachers, and librarians to use their education and expertise to discuss and determine the curriculum, programs, and media available to students while they are at school. And I ask the board to encourage any parent who does not agree with said decisions to make their requests specific to their children only. Again, I want to say how much I appreciate everything you're doing and the time here tonight. And I have extra time, so thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for trying your best with my
All right, that's all for public comment? Yeah. All right. Item 6.1 is an informational item from our ambassadors and members of our Superintendent Student Advisory Committee. Anya and Colton. And Monica.
So tonight we get to talk about the future of the Student Advisory Committee and the roles of student ambassadors. There's several vacancies that are going to be coming up in the next school year. So this is a chance to kind of lay out the structure and really get a head focus on what's next to come for us in this committee.
Okay, so yeah, just so we can just preface some things before we get into the presentation itself. Like Colton said, we're going to be recruiting some new people. There's a lot of seniors on our committee. They're going to be leaving next year. So as we're recruiting new members, we just wanted to emphasize a couple of the objectives and goals that we have for the members who want to join the Student Advisory Committee or want to be a student ambassador next year. I think the most primary objective is to illuminate student voice. The whole purpose of this committee is to highlight the concerns, opinions, thoughts, and ideas of our respective student bodies, and this is a really big portion of what this committee is all about. In order to be an effective member of this committee, one must be extremely driven and have a passion for these thoughts and passion for representing student mindsets. The second objective is to collaborate. And of course, the committee members have to collaborate amongst themselves in order to create solutions for the problems that we're seeing, but they also must be able to collaborate with the student bodies, whether that be indirectly through research and through surveys, or directly by directly speaking with them through interpersonal connections and communication. And finally, they have to be able to employ vision. As you might have seen this year, there's been a lot of, I guess, dilemmas and problems and issues that have come up that we've seen prevalent in our student bodies, whether that be sexual harassment, whether that be mental health issues. But in order to actually solve these problems, our members must have the vision necessary to know what a solution could look like for our future.
And so now kind of to go over the structure that we settled on for next year's committee. Like I said before, there is going to be some vacancies next year, myself included. As much as I love this role, I get to graduate and move on to college. But so we have actually all of our members from Oswego High School. We're seniors this year, so all spots at Oswego High School will be filled. Additionally, with the 2 new spots we've added to the committee. So there's going to be 2 more students from each high school on the committee, 2 more positions. So a total of 5 from each high school, and then included in that 5, 1 student ambassador for each high school to the board. So up there highlighted in light blue is the positions that are filled. We've decided, because of the vacancies and what a phenomenal job Anya and Monica did, Anya will stay on as the OEHS student ambassador for that continuity and kind of everything that they've learned, we've all learned, to go on with future committee members and a future student ambassador. So yeah, that's and Monica will be staying on too as an advisory committee member, because she was fantastic. She, as well as everyone else on our committee and all the adults that were able to be on that committee, it was a really great dynamic group of people that, I mean, we were all so excited to work with, and it's bittersweet to leave, but it was a really exciting opportunity. So, but this is the structure for next year. So
This is the structure that you're proposing, or this is the structure that Dr. Sparlin has approved for you guys?
Proposing.
proposing.
This entire presentation comes from them, Lori.
I wasn't sure. I gotta ask.
Okay, I'll introduce myself real quick. I'm Monica Lopez. I'm a junior at Oswego East High School, and I'm just a member on the Student Advisory Committee, and I'll be talking about the term length. So, Anya and I specifically will be saying, going into our senior year, we're going to be staying on the committee, and we're super excited for that. And she'll be staying as student ambassador, and I'll be staying on the committee, which means that for new ones, like Colton said, we'll be coming up for OE. And then, so when you apply, when you apply on the committee, you'll stay on your junior year and hopefully continue into your senior year, unless there's some extenuating circumstance that prevents you from fulfilling your role your senior year, but it'll be expected to continue into your senior year. And then currently only juniors and seniors will be able to apply. Yeah, they'll be chosen their junior year to expect to continue. Yeah, sorry. And then we're currently not accepting any underclassmen as permanent members on the committee, but we're open to that idea. And then, yeah, just like Colton mentioned before, there are currently a couple of vacant positions.
Yeah. Okay. So the actual application process is quite a bit to talk about. So I'm going to try to cover some of the big points right now. Like Colton and Monica had mentioned, we're planning on having 4 student advisory committee members per high school through this proposal that the SD308 Board of Education can kind of like think about, and then 1 student ambassador per high school, and they would all be juniors and seniors as of right now through this proposal. There are a couple of different, I guess, roles and responsibilities that each type of member would have. But it's mostly schedule-based, not skill-based, and I'm going to expand a little bit upon that later. So a student advisory committee member has to attend the scheduled student advisory committee meetings. They usually happen, after school, either OEHS or at OHS, sometimes through Zoom. They have to assist with research that we've done through some of our meetings, and also through survey development, which has been administered a couple times this year, as we've talked about through our student advisory committee reports prior to its administration. And finally, they have to be able to provide insight into student voice specifically. They have to be good with collaboration, communication. These are really important skills to be a student advisory committee member, and that's the primary role of that job. A student ambassador also is to attend the student advisory committee meetings. They also attend the Board of Education meetings, as Colton and I have been doing this year. And they would be providing student ambassador reports. They would also assist with the research and the survey development prior to administration, but they would also provide and convey student voice to the student board. And it's through that relationship between the committee members that get that student voice input and the relationship with the student ambassador who gives that input to the Board of Education that we can have that smooth flow and really provide that connection as liaisons between the students and between our Board of Education to kind of illuminate some of the problems and issues, or even just the thoughts of our student bodies. So then kind of just like I guess bouncing off of that, we were thinking through this proposal that we would only have one application for both the Student Advisory Committee member and for the Student Ambassador. But at the beginning of the application, students would have the option to be considered for only the Student Advisory Committee member, only for the Student Ambassador, or they would be open to being considered for both. And that's because there's a lot of similar skills for both roles. There's a lot of public speaking or just interpersonal communication. There's a lot of, I guess, collaboration. It's the ability to be able to do things on your own, but also have that sense of teamwork. But the main difference is, the schedules, what types of meetings you go to, that sort of thing. And we think one application, which would be a little bit more efficient to analyze, seeing as we have quite a few vacancies, might, I guess, evaluate the applicants effectively. And then we had a couple of things that we did like about the old student ambassador application elements. One of that was the 2 recommendation letters. I think that's a really good way to gauge student, I guess, like personality, student involvement inside or outside of school, an essay gauging the purpose of them applying for the role, and I think that really evaluates someone's drive, like what is, I guess, your motivation for wanting to be on this committee? What has driven you to want to represent the issues and the thoughts of your respective student body? And we also did appreciate the fact that there was an interview after this application had been reviewed, and I'm going to go a little bit about the application review after this slide. But about the interview, last time it was conducted by the entire Board of Education, but we had proposed, though we're open to that as well, we had proposed that it may be conducted by the returning Student Advisory Committee members. And that would be in tandem with also Mr. Grays, Mrs. Bankowski, our principals, Mr. Gatewood, and Dr. Waller, in order to incorporate, I guess, some sort of student voice into the decisions for our future Student Advisory Committee. And especially as students who have been in this role before, it may be important that we have a say, or I guess some sort of, perspective into who we might be working with in the future. And then, like I said earlier, there is application review, and that did happen before the interview last time. We want to keep that the same. We think it's good that we reviewed the applications and then determined who we would want to personally interview to gauge who's best fit for the roles. So the people who would be reviewing the application would be the same people who would be doing the application, the interview process, just for that continuity. And we'd have to consider several things. First one's availability. Like I mentioned, there's differences in schedules. So one person who may be, fit for both roles might fit better into either student ambassador or for student advisory committee member, depending on that schedule. And the second thing that we'd consider based on that schedule, aspect is the multiple year commitment if they're not seniors already. And of course, that's not mandatory. People might not be able to do it for several years, but it's definitely a benefit if we can have that sort of flow with experienced members as they continue in that position, as new members are coming on as well. And that could be kind of like, Monica helping new members come in, adapt to the role and the responsibilities, or I would help the next student ambassador with their roles and responsibilities as well. And we also thought that possibly seniors and juniors could be considered equally, because this is more evaluated not on age, but mostly on qualification, your drive, your motivation, and your purpose that you want to accomplish within this committee. So there will be no advantage or disadvantage through this suggestion based on grade level.
And so that concludes this presentation. If any of you guys have any kind of questions, feel free to open up to any 3 of us. I would just like to say one more time, this was a really great opportunity. I appreciate Dr. Sparlin and the board for creating this role for students. Like I said in the first board meeting I attended, it's a great opportunity to have as many voices at the table as possible. And with our added positions, there's going to be even more voices at the table, hopefully. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free.
I have some. I'm going to, because I get to hear from you guys more, I'm going to direct some of these to Monica also so she gets to participate too. Yeah. So tell me about what would be your guidelines as you're interviewing new people to come onto this committee? What would you be looking for in people to join the committee? Have you given that much thought yet?
I really enjoyed the questions that we had from our original interview, because I felt like as I was answering them, I was like, oh, these are good questions, like, for me to answer. Like, I remember one of them was talking about, like, what's something that you feel like needs to be better about, like, the education system, like, what's something that we can personally improve on? And I, like, remember some of my responses about it. I was talking about, like, freshman biology, I think, of, like, the curriculum with that. That was another question, was about the curriculum, like, what can be, like, better for that? And then I think, like, involvement with, like, how much are you involved in school, and, like, what are you involved in, and, like, why are you involved in that? Do you join a bunch of things just to be in them, or do you join a bunch of things? Do you join things, join clubs or stuff like that, and actually engage them and, like, put effort into what you're into? And so questions like that, I think, would be good to.
And then kind of to add on to that, by looking at their school activities or whatever they're involved in, you can see that drive and commitment they have to any kind of position or anything that kind of they're involved in. Looking for someone who is able to gauge the student body, to be able to reach out to students, to have ideas on how to reach out to students. That was one of the questions I know we were asked was, how are you going to reach students? It's a really important factor if you're going to be sharing student voice, and kind of not limiting the knowledge, experience, and opinion to that room, to that committee, but really reaching out to the entire student body, because that's who all of us speak for. That's who everyone in this room represents and tries to make a great education system for. So kind of looking for those qualities is really important in finding someone who's going to be successful in any one of these roles. So.
Yeah, and I think, like, I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was going to just ask if you had anything to add.
I feel like I always have something to say, but I think one thing that I was considering, because I was thinking about this when I was, like, making this slide, I was like, what am I really looking for? And I think a really big one is problem solving, because we're faced with, like, so many issues, and I hear from so many students all the time, because they're like, yeah, I know you're the student ambassador, what about this problem? And I'm, like, thinking about it, and there's, like, you're approached with so many different issues that either you hadn't considered before, or you didn't think you'd have the opportunity to share before. And I don't remember what question it was, but it was a good question. There was a question we got during our interview, and it was, like, a very, like, in-the-moment situation, like, what would you do if this happened? What would you do if someone reached out to you? And I think the ability to create a response that's genuine, on the spot, like, this is what I would do in order to make sure that this committee is successful, or in order to make sure that student voice is illuminated. Having that problem-solving skill, being able to respond effectively in a genuine manner that shows that you actually care about the purpose of this committee is so important. That's something that I would definitely look for.
Is that a spider?
Yeah.
It's a spider.
Those are,
I'm like, yeah.
It just was dropping down right as Anya was talking.
Good job, students over there. I couldn't do that. You guys just did that with a spider dropping from the ceiling.
It was teeny, teeny, tiny.
Well, I didn't know there was a spider dropping.
Shh, just say you did. It's all okay. Yes, and I maintained composure. You guys, this is pretty cool to get to see some of the work you've been doing. What are the things, and again, I'll start with Monica just because she doesn't normally get to have an opportunity to share. What are some of the things that you're looking to address in a more robust way next year in the committee, now that you'll have some people potentially returning that have done this before? What kinds of things would you like to be able to do that you weren't able to do this year because everyone was new? Does that even make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
I would still like to continue talking about the issue of sexual harassment, because I just remember when that survey came out, and that's such a big population of people were super concerned about that. I was just like I personally wasn't super concerned about that, but I think another trait when you're on the student advisory committee is being open-minded and realizing that, like, there are a bunch of problems that may not affect you, but they affect everyone else, and this is a big problem that it needs to be solved, especially with such a heavy issue of sexual harassment. So I think that I would like to continue more, and I think a lot of more of mental health, because that's still, like, a really, like, popular issue that keeps occurring and that students are still concerned about. And so trying to figure out more ways. I still feel like we haven't really, students still aren't necessarily fulfilled with everything that the district has been doing, and I still hear complaints about mental health, and I still hear my classmates complaining all the time, and I'm like, well, you can complain, but what are you going to do about it? Let someone know so something can be done. And so I think mental health is another one. And I think just more like curriculum-based stuff too. I think just like in like the student-teacher like relationship and stuff like that, like how to like better that relationship in the classroom.
I think
Anything
she
to
hit it.
add?
No, I think she hit it. You know, just being able to continue it, like, because like we spent so much time thinking like, how are we going to do this survey? You know, how are we going to reach everybody? But now we got like a head start. I think we can just hit the ground running. You know, like this is exactly what we need to target. We have the data from our first student survey. I think we can make a lot of progress, seeing as we have returning members to guide our newer members.
And like truly like implementing like new it's like not guidelines, but like something new, implementing something new to actually create like an effect on students, because we say we're going to do it, but I want to be able to actually do it and actually have it like make a difference, and I want to see my classmates and my peers more happy and more content with like what's going on.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that you guys did on this. Thanks for answering those.
Yeah, I do want to say that, you know, I've only been on the board, I don't know, what, maybe a month
Less
and a half
time
or
than some
something.
of our student ambassadors.
Yeah, exactly. But the feedback that I've gotten, that you've shared, has been invaluable already, so I think that it already matters. And it does make a difference already. So, and I've only been here 2 months, so it's probably been more than I even know. So,
Great job.
Thank you.
Does the board have any other questions regarding this?
I do. I have 2 questions. How is the transition with everything that was the data collected, the learning with regard to sexual harassment? How are you going to transition that from the current team to the new team? Is there a plan for that?
Like specifically interpreting the data?
Yes.
So it does help us that there's 2. It does help them that there's 2 returning members. We had great assistance from Dr. Waller. I mean, she spent so much time disaggregating data so that, you know, for some of us that have never looked at a Google form or answers from a Google form or any kind of survey, she did a real good job of giving us it in a format that the minute we looked at it, we could lay out and sit here at a table and say, okay, well that's clear that that's an issue, or you know, this amount of students are worried about this, or whatever the case may be. I think having, you know, Dr. Sparling, Dr. Waller, and Mr. Gaywood and our principals there will really help that transition, because Monica and Anya, they've had experience with this, but all the adults, they've had even more. But I think now that they've really been able to look at that data or look at any kind of raw numbers and get a conclusion out of it, and them still being there, that's really going to help any kind of transition to new members. And it was really helpful as a new member, as someone doing this for the first time. So I think that'll even be more beneficial having adults and 2 of your fellow peers helping you along the way.
Yeah, we still have all the disaggregated data. I think we still have the research papers, and we discussed that as like a whole team. So I'm pretty sure we're pretty clear on everything. And I think another thing is the fact that we can really just like communicate them. Like the first couple of meetings could be centered around, you know, just providing that information, setting that foundation. And possibly even another part of the interview or the application process is, you know, seeing like with some of the work that's been conducted this year already, how do you think that's been implemented? Are there improvements to the implementation? Was there anything memorable from those surveys? Just to gauge if our applicants really understand the format and the structure and the impacts of what we've done as a committee, and seeing that from the reverse perspective.
That's what I was hoping to hear. And then my second question is, you've provided really great roadmap and steps forward for us, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Is there anything else that you would ask of the administration to support this student voice going forward? You can ask for anything. I'm not saying you're going to get it. I'm just saying you can ask.
I still feel like something that's always been on my mind at these meetings. I still feel like we're missing like a student population that like, I mean, there's not much we can do about it, but I figure we could do something like students who like don't always like check their emails and don't like, how to phrase it in a nice way, students that aren't necessarily more active in school like us three. And I still feel like we're still missing that like little population that is probably getting affected by this by the most, and it's just like this little forgotten population of students that are like kind of like left to the side, like, oh, if they don't want, the population of students that don't want, they aren't doing anything to get help, but truly they need that help, they need that assistance. So I still feel like if we could figure out a way to reach out to those students that like, they may put up a front, may show some resistance, but still being like, hey, like, we're trying to help you, like, administration is here for you. Because I still feel like there's just this big wall between the administration and the principals and these teachers and the deans and the students, and there should not be that wall. It should be a bridge. It should be like that easy communication. So I still feel like that's still there, and I just, if there could be some way for administrations and teachers and deans and stuff like all the employees just to be more like not like you're already engaged enough, but like doing like the extra step to get to those like that population of students.
Incredible insight. You just spoke for a lot of people. Thank you. That's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah.
You
Does-
guys,
I was going to say, go ahead.
no, I want, you weren't, okay. So, can I say?
Yeah.
So, you know, when we brought the Youth Participatory Action Research Project to the district, I just want to say you guys are like the poster children for it. Like, I have met the authors of this project and this initiative, and they would be so proud of you
Yes.
guys for what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it really is student-driven. And so when you want to know what's going on in your school, this is an example of how to get to it. And for you all to, do you see the skills that you're gaining? When you talk about how Dr. Waller showed you all how she was disaggregating information or data, and you were able to see it for yourselves, this is what YPAR does. It actually creates these social scientists as students who are engaged in methodology and creating questions to be answered, and then analyzing it and making meaning of the data. I mean, it's just like all right here, and I'm just so excited. I'm so excited for what you're learning, for what you're doing, for what you're discovering for our district, and it's meaningful, and you can take this and put this on your resume for colleges, and they are going to be very excited that you're gaining all these skills, but that you're making an impact for our district. So appreciate it very much.
Should we ask Allie and Jared if they?
Yeah.
Of course.
Allie, Jared?
Yeah, it's hard to hear everything, so if this is covered, I apologize, but the only thing that I had was, first of all, I've been just thoroughly impressed, I want to say that, but the only piece that I have, I certainly, sorry, excuse me, I certainly understand the junior and senior piece, and I don't have a problem with that at all, but I certainly wonder about looking into the future, some type of mentorship where we're advertising this for freshmen and sophomores, kind of looking to make sure that they understand this option and so forth. And again, it's hard to hear everything, so that might have been covered, but I don't know if we could speak to that or talk about maybe that option, just making sure that we're getting that advertisement out to them.
I also appreciate that you guys are comfortable enough with us to ask questions. I know at the last meeting, and I know that we ask you guys a lot if you have questions, but I noticed at the last meeting, you asked your own, and that was huge for me.
Same.
Same.
If I could answer the one question that Mr. Ploger asked, we did consider when we were talking about this, the fact of considering underclassmen. We thought as of right now, specifically with freshmen, it's kind of hard to, or there isn't really an avenue right now to reach out before they get, because you get to freshman year, you're in a new building. It's kind of hard to reach out over the summer or even in their end of their eighth grade year to talk about this position or gauge any kind of interest in it. and really your freshman year should be focused on adjusting to high school. Now, and same thing with sophomores. It was kind of the fact that, this is going to be the second year. That doesn't rule out any ever underclassmen being a part of any process. And we even talked about, while not having a permanent member on that committee, certainly you can gauge any type of sophomore or freshman or multiple, a group, have a group of sophomore or freshmen come to any kind of forum with us or any kind, just to gauge their interest. That's always possible. I know that just the fact that, it was the second year and there's not really an avenue to reach out to anyone who's not even in the high school yet, when this is a committee and roles held by high school students. I just knew that was kind of, we all knew that was maybe pushing it a little just for the second year. So I don't know if you had
But
anything
any
else.
of them can submit
Oh,
questions
absolutely.
or frustrations or
Right.
to you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we should definitely improve on for next year, creating like really like open communication with the rest of our committee. That doesn't mean that you have to find the student that you're looking for that's on the committee in like a school of like 2,500 to 3,000 students, because that's hard. It's not finding all of them, but like making that, I guess, like open communication forum, like Colton was talking about, that's something that we could definitely improve on for next year. Creating some sort of, I guess, like media platform, or kind of doing more outreach, something in school, or even just like providing opportunities during lunch periods for students to come and talk to us. Because I know students have ideas. And it would be great to hear it, just like right from them, instead of, trying to get things from surveys all the time. Because while that's really helpful for widespread data, you can get some really valuable things from just listening to someone speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they may be more inclined to talk to you at a lunch one-on-one versus in a open meeting type of thing.
Yeah, in like a scary room with a bunch of adults. So like, I get it, yeah.
I appreciate that perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank
Well,
you for
I saw a lot of heads from the board nodding up and down, so I'm assuming that the process that they've laid out is you're giving them a green light to move forward with what they've suggested, proposed?
We had discussed that, I believe, in closed session earlier. I'd like to continue to do that before we make a decision.
Okay.
Yes. We'll put that on our closed session
Yeah.
next time.
All right, thank you so much. Wonderful,
Monica. Thank
great
you.
presentation.
Wonderful job.
Thank you,
Thank
Monica.
you.
Great information. Thank you for all the time you've given to the other kids. You're okay to go.
All right, Ursula, is Dr. Bailey up and running? Okay.
To Zoom.
I can.
There he is.
Okay.
Well, good evening.
The other two board members?
Did you hit conference again?
I am here.
Allie?
Ms.
Allie,
Swanson?
She's not showing up.
Two sick board members from home.
That is definitely true. But can I point out the dramatic
Yes,
improvements
I'm back.
from the days of holding a cell phone to the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Allie's there.
Dr. Bailey, you can hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Well, welcome, Dr. Bailey. This is John Sparlin. Thank you for joining our Board of Education meeting this evening. We welcome you to the meeting, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I can't see anyone. Can you see me?
We
Yes,
can.
you can.
Okay, I'm just gonna, well, I've been watching the board meeting, so I know what it looks like at least. So I do have a sense of who I'm talking to. And I've spent my entire professional career in education, and I got goosebumps from some of the presentations you had tonight between the talk program and Bionic and Amplify. And I just want to say, wow, congratulations. What a great district. And
Thank you.
I was also a science teacher, so the robotics team, I have a special place in my heart for that that accomplishment. So thanks for letting me be here tonight. And I'm sure everyone's got a lot on your plate and is tired, so I can be really brief with my presentation, although I'll make sure that I give you all the information that you need. I'm going to share my screen, and it'd be great if you could let me know that you can see it okay.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All set?
Yes.
Yes.
Set.
Okay. So I've become quite obsessed with superintendent evaluations over the last couple of years, and we started in New York State with a group of superintendents and board members, and with some research, and came up with a set of problems that we wanted to work on. So the problem that we identified with superintendent evaluations by school boards, and you could argue that this is one of the most important jobs that a school board has, is to provide a thorough evaluation of the school superintendent. And unfortunately, what we found a lot of was inconsistent or non-existent annual evaluations. As you know, in Illinois, it's the law to do an annual evaluation of the school superintendent, and I can't tell you how many times I've come across school districts that don't do annual evaluations. We've also seen in the field that there are often quite subjective annual evaluations, using superficial feedback and hearsay rather than clear criteria and evidence. We also often will see a lack of alignment between the district's annual goals, the national standards, and superintendent's actual evaluations. And then lastly, we see quite a bit of inefficiencies, whether it's a paper-based 3-ring binder or a Word document or Google Docs that take way too much valuable time for both the superintendent and the school board. So what we've been doing, and what we have now in 270 school districts in New York State, and now approximately 40 school districts in Illinois, is called Super Eval. And Super Eval is a simple, efficient, evidence-based online system so that the superintendent can use national standards and the district's annual goals to show that they have evidence of meeting those goals and that criteria, and reflecting on those goals and that evidence to promote growth of the superintendent and support the superintendent-board relationship. So that's what it is. I have a 4-minute, very short 4-minute video that will give an overview without getting into the weeds of the program too much. So I'm going to play that now. And if you could, I'm sure you'll be able to hear it, but let me know if for some reason you can't hear it.
Welcome to Super Eval. Super Eval is a new way to conduct your annual superintendent evaluations online, saving valuable time for superintendents and school board members. Super Eval creates unique roles for superintendents, school board members, and board presidents, allowing users to access only the information they need to complete evaluations based on standards of excellence. In just 5 easy steps, Super Eval defines a reflective and evidence-based evaluation process. The Super Eval dashboard drives the evaluation process displaying easy access to the 5 essential steps, completion statuses for each step, and due dates that are defined by the leadership team. The evaluation process begins with the superintendent defining annual SMART goals derived from longer-term district and/or board goals. These annual superintendent goals align with the performance evaluation. Superintendents can enter custom goals or select from an example list of goals used by superintendents across the state. Once goals have been populated, superintendents can mark Step 1 complete. Step 2 requires superintendents to reflect on each of the 24 competencies defined by the Council's Superintendent Model Evaluation Rubric. Throughout the school year, superintendents can supplement their self-reflection by adding supporting evidence to their portfolios with drag-and-drop functionality. The annual goals defined in Step 1 will auto-populate in the last domain. Once reflections are complete for each competency and supporting evidence is attached, the superintendent digitally submits his or her self-evaluation to the school board for review, triggering an email notification to all board members. In Step 3, the school board reviews the superintendent's self-evaluation, including the reflections and evidence, before conducting their own evaluations. School board members have the option to start a new blank evaluation or an evaluation that is automatically pre-populated with the superintendent's rubric responses. Each of the competencies has a rubric identifying 4 levels of a superintendent's performance, with descriptors for ineffective, developing, effective, and highly effective. Board members can also easily reference the superintendent's self-evaluation reflections and evidence. The board president can conduct his or her own evaluation as well as have a real-time, high-level data view of how the evaluation is progressing. This allows the board president to lead the board through the process. Once all board evaluations have been completed, the board president can mark Step 3 complete. SuperEval automatically consolidates all of the school board's evaluation data into a single evaluation, saving time for the board president by eliminating the need to manually collect this data. The board will then meet to review the consolidated evaluations, make any adjustments necessary, and prepare the final evaluation for the superintendent's review. This process is closed to the superintendent. Once Step 4 is completed by the school board, it triggers an email to the superintendent, permitting access to Step 5. SuperEval compares the school board and superintendent evaluations to present a data view that identifies areas of agreement and disagreement, providing an excellent catalyst for discussion. Superintendents have the option to add post-evaluation reflections and comments. At the conclusion of these 5 steps, the superintendent and school board president apply digital signatures to finalize the evaluation. Once the document is signed, the evaluation is finalized, and SuperEval generates a FOIL version of the superintendent's evaluation that can be used in response to any FOIL request. The evaluation is then stored in a digital archive that can be accessed at any time. Get the
So that'll give you a good sense of what the program is about. A couple things I want to point out. We have rubrics that are built into the system. They're based on the AASA national standards for superintendents. These should look pretty familiar to the board. It's relationship with the board, community relations, staff relationships, business and finance, and instructional leadership. So there are 24 superintendent competencies across those 5 domains. In the last section, we allow the superintendent and the board to define annual goals that they'd like the superintendent to work on so that the superintendent can put in evidence and reflection as to how he or she has met those goals. I mentioned that there are 40 school districts in Illinois. I just always list some of them because a lot of times school districts want to know who else is using Super Eval to evaluate school superintendents, and so I like to share that. I also often get questions about the cost, so I like to put that up front. Super Eval is based on an annual subscription model that goes from July 1st to June 30th. The cost is based on two evidence-based funding tiers. I believe Oswego 308 is in tier 2, if I'm not mistaken. So the cost would be $1,800 per year. That includes the superintendent and the school board for the purpose of evaluating the superintendent. Over the years, superintendents and school boards asked if we could add additional roles into Super Eval. So there is a way that Dr. Sparlin would be able to use this to evaluate his cabinet, any principals that report to him, and any additional staff. So for $100 per additional license, Dr. Sparlin would be able to use Super Eval in the same way that the board evaluates Dr. Sparlin. Dr. Sparlin would evaluate the people, the leaders in the school who report to him. And then we do have a component of this where the school board does their own self-evaluation for $300 annual subscription. And then there is a one-time onboarding fee that includes training on the program. So I'll stop talking there, and I know I've met a couple of the board members and Dr. Sparlin and presented this a couple times, so I hope I'm not being redundant, and I'm happy to answer questions that any of the board members have about Super Eval.
Dr. Bailey, nice to see you again. I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Bailey as well as 3 different school districts at the Triple I concert in this past November. And I will say I kind of floated out of there, and I think I ran straight over to Teresa, and I was like, Teresa, did you hear about this? Because it's definitely something that is needed. When I was campaigning for my board seat, one of the things that I was conflicted with and frustrated with is kind of lack of common language, lack of understanding the process, and from a strategic standpoint. And for me, going through an evaluation cycle with regarding the superintendent contract once, there was definitely some confusion. Every board member enters from a different perspective, from a different experience level. I happen to be an HR practitioner, so this is something that is incredibly close to me and something I'm very passionate about, but not everybody has the same filter through which they are doing this. And so I think the opportunity here for our district is exponential. I think that once we can align the board and the superintendent with the goals for the district, and then Dr. Sparlin can align his cabinet and so forth and so on, I think the opportunity, the synergy for that to happen, I think just will make things more transparent. I think it will give us the opportunity to save money and understand what is expected and then what is actually produced. So this was a no-brainer for me. I brought it to the board and wanted to share it. I had the opportunity, as Dr. Bailey has up there, to hear from all of these districts. They had both their board president and their superintendent present, and many of them had some of the same frustrations and challenges that we've had. And to hear their testimony as to how they were able to overcome that with this was very impressive. And we even had the opportunity, one of the superintendents opened up his evaluation and went through it with us, which I thought was incredibly brave. And there were districts that were, large and small and so forth. So you got to see, where other people were finding challenges, and they were very similar to what we were going through. Also, the automation of it, this is very similar to how teachers are evaluated. I've used the Evaluwise software before for teachers, and this reminded me very similar, where you upload your artifacts and so forth, and it gives Dr. Sparlin the opportunity to do so on a day-by-day basis versus having to sit in front of the board in a closed session and answer questions from a year ago, which is, none of us can remember what happened. So I'm just very excited about it. I hope the board sees the value in it. Dr. Bailey, when I saw this in November, though, I thought the board evaluation part, self-evaluation, was a part of this, that they were intertwined.
Do you mean in terms of cost, or do you mean in terms of the program itself?
Both.
So the school board uses Super Eval to evaluate the superintendent.
Right.
That's what the platform fee covers. It's a separate process for the board to evaluate themselves. So it's still within Super Eval, but it's a very different process where the board does an assessment of how it's meeting best practices for school boards. And then throughout the year, the board collects artifacts and evidence and reflects on those best practices, and then comes back and does a second, how are we doing type of evaluation, where each board member, for example, the board speaks with one voice when evaluating the superintendent, or whatever the thing is that the board's working on. The board completes the rubric about how the board's working. So they're connected, but they're really separate processes and a separate cost to do that.
Okay, thank you. I must not have understood that. I also want to share that the Illinois Association of School Boards has adopted this as their official super evaluation tool, and that is partially why we get a discounted fee as we are part of it. And I don't remember which district it was, but one of the districts said that they were really struggling with goal alignment. And once they set the goals for the board, and then once they set the superintendent goals, and the superintendent set his cabinet goals, they were all the same, which I thought was interesting, but they just said that the alignment of all of those and seeing it, physically seeing it, and being able to evaluate against it really showed where the holes were in their process.
And Jen, if I can add just one more point to that, the retention rate for districts who use Super Eval is 96 to 97% year over year. So when school districts, when school boards, when superintendents use this, they sign up again, and they really like how this does align goals with evidence and reflection, and gets the whole entire school district moving in the same direction, and providing that accountability for everyone along the way.
Exactly.
So that you know that you'll see right away if something's not working in terms of meeting annual goals, and that's a wonderful conversation to say, hey, this is something we need to work on. And I've always believed that education is about growth. And so that's why we do this. And we're very much in favor of the alignment piece that you're talking about. That's really important to us.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. And I know you couldn't see, I was about to start asking you some questions. I appreciate your adding on. Before we get started, though, Dr. Sparlin, are you comfortable continuing a conversation about your contract in open session?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks. Second, so I have done these, as most people could imagine, 7 times. 6
paper.
times on paper. I have compiled these 2 of those times myself. I love the concept of automation. Let me just start with that. I love it. Because having actually done this, the time commitment involved was about 20 to 30 hours that week.
Wow.
Wow.
And most of that time was spent tracking down my fellow participants to make sure that they had given thought to what they wanted to add and offer in terms of things. So that was my experience. So I can see the benefit of an automated system, but I do have some very specific concerns that I want to make sure, and this is probably more, I think you did a great presentation. I feel very clear on what it is that you provide, and I appreciate that. But really with my fellow board members, a few different things. And maybe, Dr. Bailey, first, you could answer for me. One of, and you're cool, for real, you're okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the concerns that we have had in the past, the concerns and the problems that you listed, yeah, these are real problems. And they have been throughout several different boards. However, the problems tend to be what Mrs. Johnson had mentioned, that everyone comes from a different place. So one of the things that often happens is there's no feedback given. And on this, I heard you say that you can provide evidence and documents to support the feedback throughout the year, but board, what if we don't use those? What does that do to solve the problem of, will we commit to using those tools in a way? Do you see what I'm saying? Because I have often received straight numbers without comments or feedback or anything to give any clue as to what was informing that decision. So this tool could help that, but frankly, most of these categories are categories that we have on the current evaluation. The automation process is awesome. The cost is pretty low. I believe we already have a board eval tool that we use through IASB, so I don't think we would need to, in my opinion, I don't think we would need to purchase an additional one.
No.
Dr. Sparlin, well, Dr. Bailey, so the question is, how do you solve the problem of specific feedback? What part of your tool would change that problem or solve that problem that is different from doing it manually? What about the automation process makes it more robust for Dr. Sparlin in terms of feedback?
Sure, that's a really good question. First of all, I would say that having a rubric that's point and click, the rubric has descriptions for performance. So, you know, I should show you this rather than just
Right, so we
about
currently have that same rubric for performance. I'm speaking more to the comment piece rather than the rubric.
Okay.
The specific
so,
feedback piece.
I'm going to say that, you know, if board members aren't committed to giving feedback to Dr. Sparlin, and we've facilitated that by identifying the criteria, providing the standards, Dr. Sparlin goes through and says, here's my evidence, here's how I'm reflecting on that evidence, here's how the evidence is indicative of my performance with regard to the competencies that have been identified or the annual goals. Quite frankly, there's nothing in Super Eval that will force a board member to give constructive feedback. Our point in doing this is to create the process and make it easy and efficient. But
thank you. Sorry.
I would never claim that it provides motivation or just you know what I mean?
Well, and that's what I was asking for, is to highlight that doesn't take the responsibility off of us as board members to observe, hold accountable, and handle our responsibilities. But the automation piece of it can reduce some of the barriers to having time for it. I don't think that's a bad idea. I do have a couple very, very specific questions.
But can I actually have a bridge to that, to your question. So, for instance, when a teacher is evaluated on student engagement, she or he will upload artifacts that specifically hit on student engagement, right? So
Yeah, that's the piece I really liked.
So let's say that
you
ours
have that
is
option.
community engagement for Dr. Sparlin. I'm making this up right now. Throughout the year, and we also I would presume we would want to maybe do like a quarterly or a halfway through the year and say, here's how you're doing so far.
Right.
He could have uploaded 12 things that he did in the community that we may not normally know about. So then when we're sitting having our closed session evaluation when he's not in it, and you're like, well, I know he went to this, and I'm like, well, I didn't see him at anything. We now have an opportunity to have engagement around these things where we may not have before. And so what I appreciate about this is that instead of us having to dig for it, it's up to Dr. Sparlin to say, okay, well, here's what I've done against this specific goal.
Thank you. So really quickly, Dr. Sparlin, I have a few questions for you regarding this.
Yep.
Typically in your contract, we have to agree to the superintendent evaluation tool being used, and we usually do so that you have the entire year using that tool. Is it your impression that this is going to be used for this year's evaluation, or that you will have this to inform you for the following year?
Yeah, we had that conversation when Dr. Bailey was presenting, and that's something that I had spoken to, and I would like to use it beginning for next year. So I have the year, as Ms. Johnson just mentioned, and when you talk about artifacts and uploading and be able to demonstrate the efficiencies of each one of these goals and things of that nature, so you have that year and you're able to do that as you go.
Thank you for that answer. That's kind of, that fits with what I believe I've always learned, been taught, understood about how the contract evaluation process for the superintendent works. So that makes sense. Do you like this tool, Dr. Sparlin? Does this feel like it will help you portray accurately what your job is and how you're achieving it?
Yeah, I like the things we just to parrot some of the things that were already said, aligning board and the superintendent goals along with the cabinet, because I think right off the bat I would like to use this with my cabinet as well, so we're utilizing on the same page and we're utilizing that same tool, and we have all of our arrows, so to speak, in alignment, go in the same direction. I like the self-evaluation piece. I like the idea of being able to upload the artifacts that demonstrate, that these goals have been met, and this is how I see them. And I like the self-reflection piece. And like you said, sometimes the feedback has been, it's been there, but it's been lacking. And we talked about this before. And I like this idea, but like Dr. Bailey just said, it's up to everyone to provide the feedback as well, though.
That's the key point I want to really have in this conversation is our responsibility. And I also don't care, I don't prefer having these conversations also in open session, given that board self-governance is a closed session topic. But since we are discussing it, if it's okay with everyone else, I just want to make sure I'm highlighting that it is our responsibility to be looking for these things throughout the year as well. And I think that will serve us if we use a tool such as this. That is the most important piece, is that this needs to be a consistent piece for us as well.
Yeah, for the sake of your first question, I just want to give Dr. Sparlin a chance to elaborate on the first question, because we did have an extensive conversation in regards about this year and next year.
Okay, thank you.
But I just wanted him to just elaborate on, I thought, what else we discussed in the meeting in regards to what could happen.
Yeah, we also talked about utilizing a, what's the word I'm looking for?
Light.
Light.
Yeah.
Yes. Faith,
Trial run.
Faith came up with the idea of we could do a light version of it, and and Dr. Bailey said, when we had that conversation, he said that we could do that if a light version. Obviously, the artifacts and all the types of things that would be there. I mean, if you're going to start this,
but we wouldn't have it if we didn't use it anyway.
Exactly.
Right. We wouldn't have.
But it would give us the opportunity, all of us,
to utilize the tool this year.
No, I don't think that any of that is a bad thing, actually.
And no additional cost. Thank you.
Well,
right.
And I think what I appreciate the most is this $1,800 a year contract, that is very low.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, our budget is significantly higher than that, and this would be a tool that would allow us to more effectively handle one of our most important of our 3 responsibilities, which is hiring a superintendent.
And evaluating, yeah.
Right. So I really like this.
You know, Lori, to your point about how you didn't get a lot of feedback and you had to chase it, Super Eval prompts and does the prompting, so it kind of takes a little of the human part of it out, so it's not like, ooh, the president's, bugging me, the president's bugging me, so,
block
but
the
also.
phone number. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, no, and I want to make sure that I'm also speaking accurately on behalf of all of my former board member peers that, this isn't any one person. It could be any single person in a given year if that happens to be a busy week or whatever. So that, to me, when we talk about a superintendent evaluation, is the most important thing, is that this is an ongoing tool rather than a once-a-year tool. And I know Dr. Sparlin and I have had those conversations also, that it feels incomplete. Because what if you don't remember a year ago, or even 6 months ago, or COVID happens, or all the things.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm super interested in looking at this. You actually answered my last question, which is, are you looking at using something like this for your cabinet? And you are. So that is, for me, something interesting, because I like the alignment with senior leadership and what we are also looking for, because it does put everyone on the level playing field. So that's my last question.
Well, one of the things that
I think you have to leverage
I just want to make sure
to
that
get the value.
I know.
Yeah.
What was that? I'm sorry,
And I don't know if we would
I'm
do
sorry, I missed
the
Dominic's
board.
comment. I'm sorry.
Oh,
No, I was just saying, I think it's very smart to leverage it,
Yeah.
for the cabinet and
Yeah.
however deep you want to go to get the true value. Because the $100 per additional, that's
So
Can I just get those,
Oh, yeah, for
Allie
sure.
and Jared, do you have any thoughts or comments?
Is this coming out, what bucket of money are we talking about that's coming out of capital?
No.
Capital outlay?
It comes out of the Board of Education
No,
budget.
our budget, our board budget that we typically
thank
don't use
you.
much of.
I just want to, the other point that was really driven home by these other districts that I had the opportunity to hear from is that it also holds the board accountable. And I'm not saying Dr. Sparlin has said this, but there are some times where he may get a call from 7 different board members who have issues, and it's very hard, like, what is the one voice? Because we all have very different perspectives. And he's very good about saying, okay, this is what I'm hearing the board say. But this really kind of puts it in, black and white. Here's what you said were my goals, here's the art, and so I think the other part that is very impactful is that it also keeps the board accountable.
Well, yeah, I really think this is interesting. I guess I have a few specific wonderings about things like, at this current point, we are able to see performance reviews that each of our fellow board members has submitted, for better or for worse, because sometimes for Dr. Sparlin, that helps him understand, because he knows that person, they would view this way because of X.
Yeah.
Will we and he still have the opportunity to see which board members were reviewing things, so that if we have follow-up questions, we can ask?
I had that question. I was going to defer to Dr. Bailey. I believe on the video it showed the anecdotal comments, but it looked like it had the name of the person underneath it. Did I see that wrong, or did I see that correctly?
You saw that correctly. You as a district and as a board have the option of
Turn it on or off.
providing the names of the people who provide the feedback, or you can remove the names and only provide the feedback.
So,
I've seen it done both ways in
So hard, you
districts.
can't see.
My personal feeling is that there should be a name attached to that feedback, and I think that's the way you build relationships, is that you address people who have things to say. So
Thank you, Dr. Bailey.
My recommendation is to keep the names, but some districts don't want to do it that way.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. I know it's so hard to see doing the remote, and I really appreciate you coming in to do this via video at a disadvantage. Actually, on further reflection, I think we don't give Dr. Sparlin the names of the people, but we do give each other the names of the people. So that would be something we should probably consider, is that.
The other thing, Dr. Bailey, and you can touch on this, their program is also very customizable. You can call his team, and if we choose not to use those 24 and we want to add one of
that might be a further conversation perhaps in the future at some kind of board agreements or whatever, but I feel confident that I have the information that I need now from Dr. Bailey if we want to ask anyone else.
Allie and Jared, do you have any more questions before we let Dr. Bailey go?
I would like to expand on one of Lori Doyle's questions, if I may. The question where we all answer a question differently based on sometimes our own relationship with him, like how I would
or
answer
experiences, yeah.
Right. So how I would answer a question is sometimes very different from what fellow board members would answer a question. So how does buying your system cut down on that, or is it just that's always going to be how it is? This is just a different tool to use.
Yeah, that was. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll let him answer.
That's a really good question too. I think the way our program works is that when you rate Dr. Sparlin on the rubric, it takes the average of the seven responses.
Yep.
He might, so that in terms of the rubric, that's where he'll be evaluated on. So whether it's highly effective or effective, wherever that happens to be. But then the comments themselves can be based on very different experiences from the board members. But I would also argue that the most important thing that should be based on is the evidence that you either see or don't see in Dr. Sparlin's portfolio, if you will.
That's legal.
Is there waiting?
There are things that you, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, in the last several reviews that Dr. Sparlin and the board have agreed to, we have weighted different sections in different ways. Is that an option with the software?
It is not.
Okay. So that would be a difference in how we do an evaluation. Currently, and again, with Dr. Sparlin's permission, we rate, in past years, we've rated the board priorities as about half, even though there might only be 4 or 6. That's about half of the weighting of the review, and some of the other things have a lower level rating based on what the board has felt at that time. We wanted to make sure he focused on being board priorities. In this format, if there's no weighting available, it's worth considering how does that get set up so that the importance of board priorities, if that is still this board's priority, is to have board priorities rated higher in his performance review. How are we going to capture that and not dilute it with other things that we have currently been weighing as less important because we might have 14 things, but 4 of those things are worth half of the grade, so to speak.
Well, it can be based on what the competencies are that we choose. So if we think whatever board priorities isn't actually an item. So whatever those board priorities are, let's say social emotional, we pick the competencies that match that, and those will.
I'm sorry, I thought I saw on here, I thought I saw on here, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right, because this is different to me. And I haven't had the luxury of looking at this previously. So I had seen on here in the quadrants.
Yeah, you were looking at the 5 domains with the.
The 5 domains in our annual goals.
Oh.
F1, F2, F3.
I'm
That's what
sorry.
I'm referring to as
Yeah,
board
sorry.
priorities. No, common language is important.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing that as 3 things in a list of, yes, thank you so much for changing to that one. That was the one. Yep. There's 24 competency and only 3 are on annual goals, whereas currently we rate those as 50% of the evaluation. Am I correct, Dr. Sparlin, that that's about, or 45%?
It's more of weighting, yes.
Yeah, it's a higher weight. So that is, so I get the competency that goes into each of the goals.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's, and to use the common language annual goals, those three things weigh a lot higher right now, which is a significant change. So I would be concerned about, and thank you, Allie, for expanding on that, because that's actually what made me think of it. I want to think about that part of it, and how do you make this, is this system able to work for what we have valued? Doesn't mean we still do, but what we have valued, which is we really want to see.
And I think we'd have to discuss that in closed session.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's some of this that kind of falls into open and closed, and I don't want to overstep on that, but it's hard to have this conversation without those pieces.
Yeah. I think we can make it work.
If I could just add my 2 cents, if it's okay. There are, most districts identify specific competencies and don't evaluate the superintendent every year on all 24 competencies.
Right.
So the way I would probably do that, given what you've asked me, is I would identify specific competencies and remove other competencies. Like, that's just a click in a box, and you can pick which competencies you're using. I would also say that your annual goals are where, maybe that's where you put your highest priority, is in the annual goals, and you can put as many or as little as the annual goals you want. You also have the option of just using annual goals and evaluating Dr. Sparlin not on the 24 competencies, but on annual goals, and having that be the only thing that you use.
Thank you for sharing.
There is some flexibility.
I heard that there is flexibility to that, and so the conversation about that would be a closed session conversation, I think, that we would all have together. But thank you for explaining that there is flexibility in that.
Okay, anything else? Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Bailey. We'll be in touch.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for what you do for our community. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. Item 7.1 is a presentation from Associate Superintendent Faith Dahlquist regarding professional development.
Thanks. I thought I'd come over here so it's a little easier for those people at home to hear from me. So I'm really excited to talk about Envision 308 and professional development this evening. As you may recall, part of Envision 308 is having an annual report on all things professional development, which also includes the preview of a 3-year plan. This is the first time that we've presented this, but we'll have this annually. And just as we're getting started, I felt like it was really important to talk about some of my beliefs around professional development. It is the responsibility of all of our leaders. While I'm party of one here this evening, there are hundreds of people that are involved in all of the processes of developing our staff with professional development. I feel really strongly that the trainings that we provide to our administrators and to our teachers need to model the type of instruction that we want our staff to provide to our students. And then training needs to be ongoing. It is not a one and done type of a situation. We bring on with our coaches and have repeated processes, and then it needs to be monitored through classroom walkthroughs, through our student and staff survey data, as well as our achievement data, to see how we're doing. And then finally, each staff member has a role in their own advancement of their skills. It's my belief that if we want to develop our administrators to be instructional leaders, then we have to expect them to model good instruction. So this next piece is something that we use on a regular basis. It's our vision for instructional practices. And what's a little unique of this is it's not just student and staff. The far right columns are also what roles do our building administrators and our district administrators provide when they do this training. So this is part of our Climate for Learning in Component 5, and it is our expectations for designing for engagement. And when the team sits down to work with their coaches or with each other to make professional development, we keep these things in mind. So whether it's for students or whether it's for teachers, we're looking at having some autonomy in the learner, that they have some choices there, that they have some differentiation, because we have lots of experts whenever we sit down to do professional development, as well as novices, just like our teachers do with our students. And then having collaborative structures and having time to reflect, that's really key with what we're wanting our staff to do with our students, so we need to model that. And then really being upfront with what is the expectation and learning targets. We talk about that within our classrooms. And then the sense of inquiry, of having staff or students ask questions and apply their learning. And of course, all of that with the final role is about establishing a level of trust where students and staff can take risks and then go on with learning. So this next chart is really something that I'm going to come back to several times throughout the presentation. Whenever I sit down and look at professional development, or I'm like, oh, we're just not getting it, I reflect on our ability to do these 5 things. And this is not just about professional development. This is about how do we build a climate. Because when you think about training 2,000 people over many complex issues over many years, this is about managing complex change. And this chart kind of keeps in mind what is important when you do that. So for example, in the first column, if you go down and vision is missing, then you go over to the purple and it tells you what emotion is likely to happen. Then you have confusion. If you have all the skills, which is usually where professional development starts and ends, if you are missing that, you have anxiety. With education, incentives is more about the why do we do what we need to do. If that's missing, then we're at resistance. If staff doesn't have the materials or the time, then you get to frustration. And without putting all that together in an action plan, then you have false starts. So it's really important to start with the vision, and when at all possible, you need to encapsulate all the different things that go into what a teacher or a school or a district needs to do so that they aren't standalone and they aren't considered death by initiative. So this is the vision, and for those of us that, for those board members that are brand new, you may not recall this Climate for Learning framework was written right before COVID. And this is everything that we are trying to do. Special ed, general ed, English learners. This is the entire picture of what we want for students and for staff. And it's not just the ESD directors that work on all of this. We've recently adopted an interview process through HR where our questions for teachers and applicants are aligned with the Climate for Learning. So we say right up front, this is what we are about in SD308. So I'll start with this piece and all the vision, because as I said, if we don't start off with that vision piece, we can't do the rest of all of the things that we need to do. So at the very top with explicit SEL instruction, you'll see my green check marks there, and green says it's established, and yellow is we're getting close. So with explicit SEL instruction, we've incorporated what are the SEL standards, what are the curriculum materials, where we're at with where we want to go. Does that mean that we're there yet? No, but we have that vision of where we're going. So the check mark is green. When you look at common expectations for behavior, we have a vision of where we want to go, and our elementaries and our junior highs have common expectations for behavior. But our high schools don't yet. They're almost done. I was hoping by tonight I would be able to turn that to green, but they're very, very close. And then the next piece is how do we integrate SEL, and you'll see later that we have some components of what that would look like. Just a reminder, those social emotional learning skills, a lot of what we're talking about is organization, managing emotions, managing stress, being able to look at different perspectives. So that goes very well when you're talking about a math problem. Do you have resilience to have that productive struggle? It goes very well with social studies when you're talking about different viewpoints. With all the different curriculum areas, we'll be working on having some of those pieces integrated. And then we did talk about youth voice, and I know we call it student voice sometimes. When we wrote this document, we called it youth voice, but those are the same things. You'll see it's a little check mark because we have some great things, and you saw a huge presentation tonight on that, but we're going to expand that, and that's going to get bigger. So I didn't know green or yellow. I wanted to give a lot of kudos to what has been done already, so it's a small green check mark. And then that next piece, supportive school and classroom climate. This is so huge that I broke it into different components. This involves our equity work, our academic work, engaging instruction. It also holds all of our expectations for our staff members' learning. In it is our vision for literacy instruction, and this is what we've been working on with all of our K-8 staff members and lots of trainings and coaching and what all of this looks like. It gives the overall pieces of what should be in daily literacy instruction. It also ties in our diversity statement in reflection with our equity statements. This is where we're going in literacy. We also have our vision for math instruction, and a lot of work has been done in the junior high level on this, and this is just being introduced to our elementary staff. It, again, describes all the types of instruction that should occur daily, and it has all of the coaching pieces of where we are going to improve our math instruction. Then the last two that are on here for vision is the staff SEL. And we do have a collaboration type of a team approach that we are wanting to roll out eventually based on John Hattie's research on teacher collaboration that is aligned with Envision 308 and inquiry-based instruction. But we realize that our staff is really stressed out right now. So we are not pushing that right now, but we have a vision of where we would like to go. And then the last piece is that supportive discipline, and Dr. Pajasic has been working with a team on this because we need to have a common shared vision, and a lot of this isn't just us at ESD saying this is what we're going to do. We want to work with teams, so we have a shared vision. We have lots of people that have put into those pieces. So all of that is just the vision. Now we need to start working on skills, incentives, resources, action steps, all of those pieces. So I'm going to go through and talk about each of those with the different areas of our Climate for Learning and our 3-year professional development plan. So first, with explicit SEL instruction, this is that first component. Now that we have a vision, we can work on other areas. We have skills and trainings that continue to need to be done. And then a lot of this work, it will now be on the why, the incentives, looking at student survey data, looking at how we are doing at meeting the needs of that, and then continuing on with all of those. Highlights of the work, each slide after this is organized in the same way that the first row is what was done in 21-22, and then the work as you proceed down each slide that would happen in all the subsequent years. Part of our decisions for all of this is we did conduct a staff survey. We had 667 responses, and we asked staff, where they wanted training with social emotional materials. That was one of the lesser needs as identified by the staff. Now I'm going to talk about common expectations for behavior. As I said, the vision is really, really close. What we really are working on now and have to put in place is collecting data by our office referrals, by talking with students, all of those pieces to get to the why we need to continue to do those improvements. And then once you have data that you can compare across schools, then you're able to really get in and target professional development and instruction around those pieces. The next piece is the SEL integrated with academic instruction, and you can see some of the highlights. Next year, as we roll out the new K-5 social studies instruction, there will be really specifics tied into how do we build social emotional learning skills with that. And then you can see in the following year, we'll have 6 through 12 with social studies. And then after that, we'll be starting to work on the K-8 ELA curriculum and how to integrate all of that. Next is youth voice and engagement, and a lot of this also is about that inquiry price and how do we get our students to really go after what they want to learn, and using that inquiry piece. You'll see a common theme as in Vision 308 and in our new materials, whether it's in math, even in the reading and literacy frameworks, but especially in science and social studies. Inquiry is a huge part of that, where students decide questions, take on their own research, and then provide their answers and get used to weighing their evidence and sources to form their opinions. Also, when you look at our staff survey on this for inquiry, that is the top 3 in the top 3 of what our staff said that they needed, so we will be building that into our plans as we move forward. Also, part of this is student choice. And we had two different components that we looked at this, not only the staff survey, where it was in the top 3 for the highest need, but we surveyed all of our high school students, and 41% of them reported that their teachers almost always or frequently provide choice. We'd certainly like that number to go up, to be higher than that. Then this again is that big category of classroom climate, so I've broken this down. This component that is here first is general, and then I'll go to literacy and math. First with general, it's really about all of our diversity, equity, inclusion training, which I want to remind everyone is about including all members of race, but it's also inclusion of special education students, specialized instruction for EL students, just really how do we meet the needs of each and every one of our students. And a lot of this is looking at data by demographics to identify our areas for improvement. We've had over 40 trainings in DEI this year, and we will continue all of those pieces. When we asked our staff, this came up as the highest need in culture responsive teaching of what they are wanting more training in. We asked them more details within that. And the 2 highest areas were recognizing and responding to inequities, and then also having courageous conversations. I said a huge part of this is knowing how we're doing and knowing how we're doing by demographics, so really getting in and looking at data. Our staff identified that as a high need as well. Then if you get to just how we are doing with all of these pieces with literacy, lots and lots of work was done with elementary and junior high staff this year on what that looks like, getting in and looking at data. We've identified some new data sources that we're going to need to especially help out our first graders next year. And then additionally, you can see when we get down to 23 and 24 that we're going to need new resources in K-5 and in ELA. This next piece is looking at differentiating instruction, which is key to both our literacy and our math frameworks. This stat was pretty interesting to me. So 50% of our staff identified this as a high need, and when we surveyed our students, 50% of them said that teachers frequently or almost all the time design activities to meet students where they are and stretch you to learn more. So we've got 50% of the students saying that their teachers are doing this, and we've got 50% of the staff. And of course, we'd like that to increase on both student and staff surveys on what they're saying that they need. This next piece is math. Specifics on this. Our data and our classroom walkthroughs show we need to work a lot on precise math vocabulary and collaborative structures. So we've had a lot of training on that. And then as we look through on what this looks like, we looked at student achievement data and saw that there is a difference in gap between our girls and our boys, and we've identified and done trainings around that. So lots of work to be done in math. Some of the things that will be coming, especially for elementary, we'll be working on number sense, and I do think that we'll need some outside training and experts in that in the next couple of years. All right, staff SEL, as we had said, we'll continue to work on that, but we're not going to roll out the team structure of those pieces because we've heard a lot loud and clear. Our teachers are tired, they're really working, and we want to keep that for a little bit later. All right. So I just want to make sure everybody knows all the different modes of professional development. There's institute and school improvement day trainings, but ongoing coaching is huge. And we do have a coach at each of our elementary schools, and then 2 that we share for junior high and 2 that we share for high school. And that ongoing piece coming alongside having somebody down the hallway that can really help answer questions or go in and teach while you model. And then we train all of them ahead of time, and then they go out and train with their principals and assistant principals out at the buildings. So we also have offerings through ESD and individual training opportunities that are just kind of a bonus if people would like to participate them. And then committee work and study groups, and of course we have a lot of staff that does individual work and reflection to really get where they need to be. This next piece is just an example of what the elementary schools have been doing since January, and we do modify this sometimes, and we backed off a little bit when we saw that staff was really feeling like they were being overwhelmed with the amount of new things that were coming in. But again, this is how we use our Wednesdays, how we use our faculty meeting times, what this looks like. And this next piece, just because I kind of geek out about how we do all of this, is just to show kind of how leadership in that climate piece has changed over the years, where you used to think you had one person that was leading, they told people, then they told the people below them, and so forth. What you really want to get down to is that design-centric piece where all those pieces fit together. If you think about math vocabulary, but if it doesn't have great classroom management or students don't have a sense of belonging or social emotional, all of it has to work together to have a great climate for learning. So when we think about what we're working on in teams, everybody within Ed Services may have expertise, but everybody has to be working on all the components of climate for learning to make it all work. So then to bring it back to what we said we would do for the next year, by next April, is by then we want to have all those check marks turned to green for the vision components, and then have a system of data collection for student behavior so that we can analyze, and then come back with another 3-year plan based off of staff surveys, student surveys, achievement data, and classroom walkthroughs. So the goal here tonight was to talk about a 3-year plan, and then there are the links of all of the different trainings that happened at the elementary, junior high, and high schools. And then part of our presentations is how are we doing? And I was back and forth between making progress and making great progress and attainment, and I landed just slightly to making great progress and attainment with all the things that we want to do for Climate for Learning. Questions? I know that was a lot of stuff.
Great.
You know what, I had a question, and we did talk about this in teaching and learning, I believe. Differentiated training, so that we know that there's teachers that could lead these training sessions,
Right.
and then they have to sit through it every year. So what
Sure.
are you?
So part of the expectations for engagement is that we would do differentiation just like we want our teachers to do that for students. So for example, when I give a training on the math framework for elementary, I will say, okay, here are where we want to go. Here are some things if you're already an expert of articles to read, and here are some things if you're a novice, and give people choices in the activities that they might do, or give them time to reflect and dive in and do their own research if they already feel that they're at this level. Eventually, even at the school level, when we write our district improvement plans, we may have one elementary school that the data and the classroom walkthroughs say they don't need this particular thing. We're not going to have one size fits all if they already show that they don't need it. So that's the type of differentiated instruction we're talking about.
I know teachers will love that.
Can I ask you about math? Is it okay?
Yeah.
So I noticed you talking about wanting to increase vocabularies and number sense, particularly in elementary. And one of the things that generally speaking is something I'm interested in is not just what we want to do for the kids starting kindergarten next year, but there's 18,000 kids that are already past that stage. So what are we going to do for those students that need to make up the things we weren't teaching before?
So a lot of the work that's been done at junior high this year is really getting in and trying to work on that. Not any fault of our staff, as there are some
Not at all.
holes or things that are going in, or even what's been lost due to COVID. While they've students, although some students have really excelled during COVID too, is getting in and looking at what are the priority math standards and diving in to make sure there's understanding on that. There are, not all math standards are created equal on what needs to come after that, so we've established priority standards and are focusing on those. Number sense is really hard if you're at junior high level and you don't have a good sense of number. So we're working on some of that, but I will be very honest with you, that is a very difficult thing to establish late in the game.
So how do we do that? Is there a way to still do that? Because that's where we look at our academic achievement at the end of the day. Our graduating seniors, our academic achievement in math is low.
Correct.
It's way lower than we want it to be. Even if it's higher than state standards, it's still not enough. So that tends to be, I think, from what I've heard from you before, a function of a lack of number sense from elementary years.
Number sense, place value, but
Yeah.
then if you're taking away some of all the standards and really getting in depth into, and if you have to go back and review the concept of multiplication in 6th grade, so that you may
And
have
you
to
do
that.
sometimes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And by giving our staff less standards that they have to teach them all to equal,
There you go.
they aren't all equal.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jared, Allie, did you have questions?
I just had one. Might sound like a strange question, but and it's 667 responses.
Yeah.
30%.
Is that good?
It's not stellar, but it is a large enough sample that we felt that we could, answer those questions. I agree with you that we'd like more than that, and we'll have to figure out different ways to get that numbers higher. It's not stellar.
Yeah, I would say that the data is probably good, but the engagement's not.
Just for clarity for the rest of the viewing audience, 667 out of how many possible? We have 2,500 employees, but not all 2,500 would have been evaluated on this. So how many were offered the opportunity to complete the survey, approximately?
I would say around 1,500 by the time you take maintenance and transportation and other people out. So
less than half is what that kind of amounts to. Thanks for clarifying.
I had a question, and I might be, this might be a little bit early for this question. You said the coaching, that is coming from the instructional coaches. Is that where the instructional coaches that we brought on with our ESSER funds?
So some of those coaches had, that was in place before our ESSER funds. Our interventionists are things that we're using for ESSER. It's been my experience that coaching, bringing in a staff member that's there that is trained on literacy, math, SEL, behavior, technology, to incorporate all of that and bring that back. What a model that we use frequently is we train the coaches, and then we train the assistant principals, and then we train the principals, and then those three provide the training to staff, so that you have the leadership and the person who does the evaluation, but also some of those experts to work alongside with staff to help support those needs. So it's not our ESSER funds. It's something that we had utilized funds before this as a means to really improve our district.
The concept of train the trainer, so to speak.
It is, but it's more than a one-and-done institute to train the trainer.
So would you either now or in the near future consider reallocating some of those coaching based on need by school? So if we really need 2 or 3 coaches at some schools, but 2 schools could share a coach, would that ever be a?
Perhaps. I don't see that in the near future for us to say that a building doesn't need a coach at all.
Right, right.
So maybe partially, but we're still at a whole lot of new training to roll out, so I don't see that right away.
I just wasn't sure if based on assessment data that you would say we really need to shift some resources to these schools to really help boost.
Right, and then it might be that Lindsay, Shannon, Heather, myself go in to do more of those pieces, or we would have coaches go over in mass on a given day and have people share that responsibility for that professional development, but not take it completely away.
Okay.
Thank
Faith,
you.
do you want to
Can,
go to your, let them try to get back our other board members? And it might be more comfortable. I know.
you want
I
to
know.
take the mic? You want to take the mic? Okay. So
You
you
have-
mentioned at the
she
top of
has
your
one.
presentation that our teachers are, have a lot on their plate, right?
Correct.
And so, like, how do you balance all?
Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's okay.
How do you balance what they have on their plate?
Right, and for those of you who are at the board committees, there's two schools of thought, and I think both are right. We have so much to do to improve. So full forces that way. We have staff that are working so hard and they're exhausted. Back off. They're right too. And I think it's about listening, talking with the principals who've gotten feedback from their staff, and we have backed off on a few things this year. We have put off a few things into next year's calendar already and are waiting into longer into the school year to give staff more time to think about that. I think a lot of it is building trust with people that they can tell you, this is where I'm at, and listening. May is never a great time. I've been doing this for a long, long time, and May is always when people are exhausted. February is also not a really great month to ask. But throughout the year, we've had some feedback, especially with our elementary staff that have to teach it all. When we're doing literacy framework, math framework, new social studies, they teach it all. And that's a big, big job.
Yes.
Staff SEL is huge to our climate for learning. If our staff is super stressed out and have short, maybe patience is a little less, or don't have more energy to make one more phone call, it falls apart. So we have to be really careful about that in designing our climate for learning.
I did have a couple questions. Can I ask? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I sneezed up. On slide 6, we talked about explicit SEL. I know that you said it was in the vision stage, but have we made attempts at making that more interactive? I know we've talked about that before.
So for high school, yes, we'll be talking to you about our plans to rethink high school SEL very soon.
And then slide 6.
Okay, I'm on slide 6.
Let me go back to it. Hold on. I had purchase of SEL materials. Question mark.
So we purchased SEL materials and curriculum for this school year?
Just for this school year?
Correct.
Okay. And that's not something that maybe the students in a collective could come up with?
Our
Or
student
have we-
advisory committee, I was actually thinking something very similar, Allie, about can our student advisory committee participate in what this redesigned high school SEL would look like?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that one.
Sure.
I don't want to buy more stuff if we have kids in our buildings who are, quite frankly, doing some pretty great things and have a pretty good handle on some of this.
I think we'll want to dovetail and put those things into place we'll want to start out the high school year with work on SEL, and our student group won't be quite ready to say on day one, this is exactly what we want people to do, but definitely including them along the way and having those peer groups is really, really impactful, and we can definitely maybe incorporate both of those. The timing won't be super great to start off the school year with it.
But we have Talk and Bionic that presented at our last meeting also, beyond just our own student advisory committees, that I would really hope that we are really taking seriously that student voice piece, that we have that tiny green check mark in that big yellow one right above it when we're talking about those two things together.
There's been
Well, and they also spoke earlier about when they're talking about there's a missing component in kids they aren't grabbing, this is a really good opportunity to also engage those kids.
And we've been having a lot of discussion around talk
and how to incorporate that as a district program. And you'll see some slides in the near future. I know Dr. Sparlin saw some very early Saturday morning on how we could write that into Envision 308 with those pieces.
I think to Allie's,
All right.
I'm sorry, are you done, Allie?
Nope, slide 15.
Okay, I'm getting us to slide 15.
I have some concern when you start talking about using referral data, because I think you're missing a whole group of information when you're only using referral data.
Can you expand on that?
I don't, you said something, I don't know if I read it, but you said we're gonna use referral data.
So one of the things that as you monitor the health of behavioral instruction on how we're doing is you want to look at, for example, if we were looking at fights that were happening at the high school, are they happening in the classrooms or are they happening in the hallways or they're all happening outside of bathrooms? Well, then how are we redirecting our resources to do that? Or if you're looking at office referrals for disrespect in a classroom, is it happening across the board, or is there a certain teacher that has a lot of the office referrals for that and they might need some support? So this is really looking at how are we looking at the health of our instruction as we teach and reinforce and build relationships. And
Right,
one
I
of those
understand what you're
pieces-
saying,
and
but I'm
one of
looking
those
for
pieces
preemptive.
is that one of that is attendance, another could be looking at those, but what did you say at the end, Allie? Sorry.
I don't disagree with any of what you're saying, but what I'm saying is you're missing a whole group of kids that are giving you some good data on what's going right if you're only looking at referral data.
So are you saying that we should be using the student survey data?
I think just as much as you're using the referral data, yeah.
To identify what's working, yes, but to identify where we need to target improvements, I think.
But that'll also give you that too. I just want to caution you that just using referral data isn't really giving you a whole picture, I don't think.
Right, it's just saying where we need specific areas of improvement.
All right.
Right.
And then slide 22.
Okay.
Slide 22, analyzing data to improve your instruction. You said it was a high need, but only 11% of the staff said that.
Right, and what I'm looking at that is the combination of high need and moderate need and I was combining those two pieces, and that comes out
Right.
in the top 3.
I get that, but here's my question to you, which has been a question for many years now. How are you looking at data if you're giving different tests?
So that is something that we need to work on, but at our new K-8 assessment, especially that we implemented this year, that's everybody using the same data to look at our literacy and our math instruction on what that looks like. And then, as you're probably aware, the high schools have been working on grading practices and finding common assessments among courses. We're not there yet, but
Yeah, we've been working on that for a good 8 years now. How long have I been here? Slide 27. I'm almost done, I swear. That was my concern with slide 22. You need common finals. I know we keep talking about it. And then we dumped finals. So if we are not doing common finals, are we now doing common assessments?
So there will be common assessments as we work through our grading practices, but as you had said, that's a ongoing process, and during COVID, I did not make a lot of progress on that.
And then slide 27 is my last one. You said ongoing coaching.
Yes.
And you talked about the high schools sharing people and the junior high sharing people. And my question are, those people that they're sharing, where are their actual offices? Are they downtown?
So at
Edmond?
At junior high, they are at DAC, but they do spend quite a bit of time out in classrooms and being at the schools or providing digital training and things remotely. At the high schools, one is at each of the high schools. They do not have offices at DAC.
And do we have room to move the junior high ones into the buildings?
Yes and no. We have one that really, her expertise is in math, and the other is in literacy, and to push them just to the schools. or house them at one specific school. Right now, we really want them to be servicing all 5 schools and working with our elementary coaches too, so that there is cross-articulation for K-8. So right now, I'm not intending to have their offices be at the schools, but they do have to be in the schools frequently, observing classrooms, even going in and modeling and teaching that.
Right, but I guess my question is, when we say frequently, do we mean the same thing? How frequent is frequent?
On some days, they're out the schools 5 days a week, some weeks.
For like an hour or like the whole day?
It
Just 'cause I'm
varies.
curious.
It varies greatly, and they did do a lot of the classroom walkthroughs and going through and looking at the junior highs and the elementary pieces. If you'd like, I can gather more of the schedules.
Yeah, I just, like, I appreciate that they're doing the walkthroughs, but if they're doing a walkthrough for a couple of days and then they're spending 2 weeks downtown talking about the walkthroughs that they did, it really doesn't help.
I can guarantee you they're not spending 2 weeks talking about the classroom walkthroughs.
Okay, I'm just, it was an exaggeration for argument's sake. I would just like them to be in the buildings.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have one thing. It's really kind of more of a comment than a question, maybe kind of a question. But first, just appreciate and thank you for strategy and the conversation around strategy of how we improve the quality of education in our district. It's so refreshing to be having these conversations now and discussing what is and what will be directly impacting our students. As I was thinking about a couple things that you said early, culture, to me, even when I'm going over those slides about what's missing, the vision, the skills, incentive, resources, and the action plan, culture impacts our strategy far greater sometimes than any of those things. And so one statement that you made, because this is a lot, and this is only one initiative that's a part of Envision 308. And so when you made the statement of death by initiative, it just made me think about the teachers and the people who have to implement it still. And so my question is what part or what role does the board play in the pace in which we're running? And because the thing that all of the things that we're trying to improve upon can actually have an adverse effect if we, so I'm just trying to figure out, I think it's all great and it's all, just like you said, the 6 in one, half dozen in the other. It's so needed, but at the same time, I just want to make sure that we're doing it right and not just doing it. And so I wanted to ask, what role do we play in that pace that could be contributing to the way that the teachers are feeling? And I know that's a very tough question, but
correct.
But
I think many times, and I can think of a particular instance where we were at the stage on OE that the more that we can work collectively to build trust and communication, it makes all of that work better. When you ask about the pace, we have to continue to listen. There were more check marks that I wanted off on green this year, but we had to really look at where our staff as learners are and our staff is at that. And I think the more that we can collectively say that our teachers are phenomenal and they're great, and our students are great, but it's systems and it's things like this that if the systems break down, we're not going to get where we need to go. The pace is hard because some teachers can be like, Faith, catch up. We should be doing more on this. And other people are like, oh, Faith, you talk so, and they're all right. Just like our teachers that have to face their students every day, there's students that can be 100 miles an hour on something, and other students need a little bit more time, either with where their past experiences were or what else is going on in their life.
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer for you on how to determine the pace other than to really set a clear vision, which is what we worked really hard to do this year, and then help people monitor their own pace of where they're going with this to differentiate.
Yeah, and it was an unfair question now that I
It's not
processed it.
unfair,
Well,
it's
I
just-
say it this way, is that I should be asking ourselves that question.
Yeah.
Because we are the ones that set the priority. So it was me thinking out loud. You gave actually a great answer to it, because that also helped inform me and made me say, oh, I'm asking her this question. This is the question I need to ask myself. But thank you, because this is great and great information, but it is something that we have to discuss when we're considering board priorities for next year.
And Eugene, I'll just add in, when you talk about culture being completely separate from all of these, when I look at culture, I tend to look at the box marked
creates it.
incentives.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Culture is very often, from my own experiences here and elsewhere, culture tends to be harmed when you disincentivize individuals from achieving the action plan. So that's where I place it. It kind of overarches the whole thing, but I don't really think it's separate so much as if you skip any of these, it's because of the culture that they're missing.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think culture is an overlay. So if you look at the purple boxes to the far right, I feel like that's the culture that we create when
Right.
you
And more
don't
often than
include-
not, incentives is where I think you see what's in it for me, or what's in it for our students, or what's in it for our community, or what's in it for whoever. Incentive to play a large role in culture, I think.
So one last comment is I agree with you, but I think culture is all of the boxes and not just
Yeah,
incentives.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's not even,
Definitely.
it may be weighted differently with each person, but I think it's all of these things contribute to it. And so I just want us to be, we have to talk about that. It's just us that we have to have
Yeah,
that
I agree.
conversation.
Well, this is where we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much, Faye.
Thank you.
Dr. Can I go out of order? Because I think I'm going to have our student ambassadors, because it's getting late.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with 8.4 and have our student ambassador reports. And then you guys are free to go, because I know you've got school tomorrow.
Unless you want to stay.
And
I'm fine staying.
You're fine staying?
I'm
But you
just
go-
saying
Can I
that-
ask just a quick question about that? Why did we move the comments till the end?
Why don't we move all the comments to the end?
Yeah, because you're bringing up a really good point. It's 9:45, and it's late for them.
Well, I was going to let them go first with their comments.
No, I know, but we moved the whole section to the end.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's just my
So then we
question.
can start with the 9.1 consent agenda?
No. I think you're misunderstanding me. I was asking, the most noticeable change to our agenda recently is that before we go into information, we usually do our student ambassador reports and board member comments and superintendent's report, but now it's at the end of the meeting. That's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, it was in an effort to give the other, I'm
The
looking at
presentation.
it, presentation and the guest, and if there's any staff an opportunity to go first, but it's, I guess, not the same consideration for the students.
Yeah, those tend to not take too long generally, so without wasting more minutes, because I've taken 2. Yeah, I totally agree about switching to let them go first.
Okay.
For today.
For today, okay. So
Well, or any day, I don't really
8.4
mind.
I'm just saying.
I'm going to let you guys go first.
Yeah.
All right.
8.4 student ambassador reports.
Okay, thank you so much. So last week, Colton and I met with Dr. Sparlin to discuss the structure and the future of the Student Advisory Committee, which our current members have been really excited to do this year, and our returning members would potentially be really excited to do again. And then last Thursday, the students from our Student Advisory Committee made that presentation we had provided earlier about the potential proposal for how we would recruit new members into the Student Advisory Committee. And then we'd also like to say that we plan on evaluating a lot of the considerations that have been brought up by the other members today, such as setting a foundation for new members and our current progress that we've made so far at the beginning of next year, or reaching out to more students to get into direct contact with the Student Advisory Committee to really facilitate more communication. But yeah, thank you all for providing such amazing insights. We really appreciated it. And thank you for listening to our proposal. And I think that's it. Is there anything to add, Colton?
Okay. So I see what you're saying now. You're just saying going forward, or just for today? We're gonna do student.
We're gonna talk about it later. We don't need to worry about it right this second. I'll explain a little bit further when it's earlier.
Okay. All right, so now we're going back up to 8.1.
Mrs. Samlin, if you don't mind, could I do my 8.3, my superintendent's report?
Sure.
And the reason I ask is because I've incorporated our student ambassadors into the
yeah.
report, so when I'm done with this, then they can take off.
Okay.
All right. So good evening, board. Tonight I'd like to, two things. I'd like to start my comments by congratulating Oswego East senior, or Oswego East student, I should say, Hannah King, for being named to the honorable mention All-State Academic Team of the Illinois High School Association for 21-22 school year. Hannah is one of 50 students recognized this year out of hundreds of nominees. So congratulations, Hannah. We've congratulated Hannah on a few different things, so quite impressive. And since our last meeting, I had the opportunity to attend the BSA Black Excellence Runway Show at OE, and it was a really great night, highlighting our students and their talents. STEP teams performed, student artwork and poetry were shared, and the students modeled different apparel and the runway walks, and it was a very well-attended event, and I know I enjoyed it, and I saw that most people, everyone that was attending seemed to do that. So last Thursday, I attended the Large Unit District Association Conference. Attending conferences such as LUDA provide me with the opportunity for some professional development, as well as the opportunity to speak with other LUDA superintendents and to engage with my peers and professional dialogue. And one of the sessions that I attended, I wanted to highlight because I participated in a session that was all about student voice. And as we all know, student voice is a priority of ours here in 308. So one of the sessions featured a panel of students, and the students were asked a variety of questions to provide student voice on educational issues. So I'm going to highlight just a couple of the questions that were asked, and then I told Anya and Colton that I wanted to ask our student ambassadors to reflect and respond on those same questions. And the first question was, if you could change anything about our educational system, what would it be and what should we be thinking about? And some of the responses from the high school students that were part of the panel were, they're not going to school to memorize and take tests, maybe do more projects instead of memorizing information. They talked about this was interesting when they brought up the concept of open book tests. They said in the real world, they need the ability to seek out resources to address problems, being able to find the solution over emphasizing memorization. They felt standardized tests such as SATs, where we spend too much time on those. A senior that was going to college talked about she was going to be a teacher and how she felt that in the profession we need to give educators more credit. After all, everything people learn in professions came from teachers. And then one of the students spoke in depth regarding representation as a student of color, and we need more students, more teachers to reflect our student body and how through their entire K-12 experience, they only had one student of color, and that was something that was very important. So when I listened to these student responses, I couldn't help but think, what would our student ambassadors and our other members of our student advisory committee, and how would they respond? So I told Colton and Anya, I wanted to ask them, if you could change anything about our educational system, what would it be, and what should we be thinking about?
So one of the responses with relation to like projects, my mind kind of went to the same thing with like hands-on learning and changing curriculum. I would want to see, especially in high school, when you're taught anything that is either just something that you have to learn in high school or something that may be struggling to you, you always kind of you say to yourself and you hear from your classmates that, oh, well, when am I going to use this, right? Like, when is this going to ever come up in my life again, or whatever, whatever the case may be. And my thought is like, what if there was an avenue where at a high school, at any school, you could take what you're learning in any class and apply it to an industry or like a field you're interested in, kind of like college. I mean, you go to college, you learn specifically about a degree, In high school, it's kind of a lot less customizable. You kind of have to pick and choose what you're interested in. And there's programs. There's actually one of our CTE teachers was discussing it with me. But there's programs that use Common Core classes like geometry or any kind of other English or math or social studies, and it goes like hand in hand with another credit that you can get for a specific issue. So with geometry, for example, it was you would take a geometry class and simultaneously take like a construction class, because I mean, right there, I mean, how often do you use geometry in construction? But just that aspect of seeing exactly, yeah, you will use this. If you're interested in this field, you're going to use this all the time. And really it kind of acts as a motivator, rather than hearing that voice that, oh, when am I going to use this? And that just kicks it to the curb. I mean, it's really hard to focus or even absorb any information after that, because, I mean, I've said it about, countless classes. And I know 10 years down the line, I'm going to be like, oh, well, now I'm glad I learned this, right? But really having it more noticeable to students that you are going to use this and having actually an option for them to use it. So that's, as a student, I wish that our education system focused more on as a whole. I mean, everywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was like good insight into like the career aspect of things. When I first thought about this question, I think something that's really, like, it's discussed a lot by students is the inclusion of soft skills and student engagement, and the exclusion of, like you said, right, like memorization-centered academia. So, like, the inclusion of, like, long-term and short-term projects, teamwork, engaging individual work, or, like, guided research that I think Colton was talking about a little bit, can include students into the academic environment and involve them in classwork in a way that's a little bit more like meaningful. It's more memorable, and it can also simultaneously teach students the soft skills that they'll need in their future, whether that be in their careers, socially, emotionally. And I think incorporating those skills into the learning environment can teach students not only how to be like a better student, but it can teach them to be a better person. And I think that's something that has to be incorporated in the educational environment, because spending so much time here, we are developing our personalities and our individualistic traits here. So kind of incorporating that and those skills that you should be learning alongside your education, I think that's really important. But yeah, that was just something like I wanted to build off of.
Thank you so much. The panel that I attended was an hour-long session, so there were quite a few questions that were asked. So I'm gonna go with one more question, and because it goes directly with what we've been talking about with some of our research and some of the information that we garnered from the staff and from the student surveys. And the second question was, why do you feel there's so much anxiety and social emotional issues for kids these days? And some of the replies that were given from some of the panel was that they got off track a bit during the pandemic, and it's going to take a while to get back, and this creates anxiety amongst kids. They talked about mental health issues have always been around. The pandemic highlighted this, and social media causes problems, deteriorates kids' social skills by texting. Everything's texting. Everything on social media makes it look like everyone is doing all these amazing things, which just isn't reality. And a couple of other things they said, like breaks need to be breaks. So when we take spring break and winter break, that we really need to step away and let kids de-stress or students de-stress and step away from that. And then they just talked about the amount of homework. When students have athletics, they have work, they have family obligations and things like that after school. So I'll ask you the same question. Why do you feel there's so much anxiety and social emotional issues for kids these days?
I think a really big one that I agreed with was social media. And it's not something a lot of, especially like teenagers, acknowledge. They're like, well, it's a great way for me to talk to my friends. It's a great way for me to talk to my family. That's absolutely correct. But what it also simultaneously does is that it shows a part of people's lives, what people want to show. It's part of the whole story. They can show the best things about themselves, their perfect academics or their perfect social life. And it makes people feel like that's the standard and that's what they have to achieve. And it creates a lot of pressure. And it makes you feel like, why am I not like this all the time? But nobody's like that all the time. You know, everyone has their own set of problems, and everyone's completely different and completely unique. But social media sets a really high standard because everyone's only showing what they want to show, and everyone can only see what's shown there. And I think another reason might also be because students lack direction and guidance. When you're deciding your career or deciding your entire possible future, it's like a huge burden. And with the age for finding your future career getting lower and lower as there's more competition in the educational field, some students may feel like they have to start deciding things as early as middle school to get a head start, to start standing out in post-secondary education. Because if you start in high school, some people might think, well, I'm not going to be good enough, and a college might not look at me, or a future job might not think I'm qualified enough. And it's a lot of pressure, and I feel like there's so many options provided in schools, which is amazing. It's something that I've truly loved being in Oswego East. There's so many amazing extracurriculars. I've really started to find my passion, but a lot of people don't have those resources, and that lack of guidance in finding that pathway means that a lot of people are under a lot of pressure all the time to figure out the entire rest of their lives between the ages of 14 and 18.
And kind of piggybacking off that, I thought of the same thing as just in the pandemic, social media, that was really one of the only forms that we could interact with students that we were no longer seeing 7 hours a day. And I think it only exploited the fact of how, really toxic it can be. And to the point of, to a point being made of, school getting harder. I don't necessarily believe that school or schoolwork got harder, but that huge event that happened to all of us, it made it harder to deal with all of those same expectations that we once had for ourselves, that others, the school had for us. It really was kind of a pause that completely shook up what our generation, our students as a whole, thought was expected. And so when I think of, why there's so much anxiety and emotional effects on us, the first thing that came to mind was, so it was really factors outside of school and curriculum. While that plays a factor in it, it was kind of how those things affect how we can learn from school and learn from curriculum, and how that just exacerbates all of that. So that's, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for both of you sharing your responses. I told Dr. Berkey, the executive director of the Large Unit District Association, the next time they have a student panel, I want to make sure I'm able to bring our 308 students to talk to the superintendents, because I am always so impressed with your insight and what you have to say. So thank you. That's my report for this evening.
Thank you. If you guys would like to leave, you're certainly welcome, okay? All right, so we're going back to 8.1, board member comments, and I know there was a presentation that you wanted to do, Jen.
So over the past few weeks, I've had the honor of participating in Oswego High School's Talk and Hike programs, as we all know, that fall under the Bionic umbrella. They shared with us these programs at our last meeting. Until I experienced them in person, though, I truly had no idea the impact that they were making on our students. I wanted to give a special shout out to the high school students who have created this amazing safe space to share vulnerable life experiences with each other. Talk and Hike have not only shown to be powerful, but even transformational. They center student voice and validate students' lived experiences. I know that a lot of people have contributed to Talk over the years, but I wanted to just give a special thank you to the teacher sponsors, Wendy, Colleen, and Rachel, who have poured their time and energy and heart into these programs. Last week, during Talk at OHS, I also had the opportunity to speak with administrators from Minooka, Valley View, and Romeoville. They were all there to train them and their students to train with our students and teachers so that they could take those programs and implement them in their districts. This next year, Yorkville, Elgin, Newark, Plano, Sandwich, LaSalle, and Tri-Point will also be training with our staff and students. To the seniors, I just wanted to give, I spent the day at Hunt Club with Hike, and then this was talk at OHS. That's a former OHS student that came to speak to the participants. I wanted to give a special thank you to the seniors, just an incredible group of students who literally I think are going to change the world. While visiting Hike at Boulder Hill with the 5th graders, I just wanted to show a little bit about how each of the classes are introduced. Maybe not. Do you know how I play the video?
It looks like something. Video would have to go. Yeah. What does it say? Yes.
Oh. There we go.
So here it goes.
There's no sound. Anyway, it's very exciting.
It is. It's very exciting.
If you haven't
Well,
experienced.
it's just like the football games where they run through the tunnel, and it's all that excitement and people standing on each side and look, there you go.
So
kids
the energy is absolutely incredible, and those students are so in awe of the high schoolers. They're like superstars, and it was beautiful to see. Try to get to the next slide here. While visiting Hike, Mrs. Simelton and I also had the pleasure of meeting the Boulder Hill Watchdogs. Watchdogs is an acronym that stands for Dads of Great Students. This is a family and community engagement educational initiative. These awesome dads, I really wish you could see the pictures. There they are. These awesome dads provide positive male role models for students, demonstrating by their presence that education is important. They also provide an extra set of eyes and ears to enhance school security and reduce bullying. As you can see in these photos, dads were reading with students, patrolling the school entrances and hallways, escorting students from one class to another, supporting staff. They had 10 staff members out, and so much more I'm sure that they do that I wasn't able to capture. Mrs. Simelton and I took the opportunity to chat with them and learned that these specific dads take off 1 day a month. They use their PTO time to spend the month in the schools. They were enthusiastic, they were engaged and excited, and they are certainly making a difference. I also want to thank Principal Jones for the tour of Boulder Hill. I had such a warm and welcoming feeling. It is without a doubt a special place. Finally, I just wanted to congratulate the Benarsic Junior High Bulldogs on 20 years of learning, growing, and achieving. I'm so sad that I can't be there on Friday to celebrate with them, but I wanted to extend my gratitude to the students, teachers, and staff that have made Benarsic a successful school. We may not always be able to make event dates, but I know that we all truly appreciate being invited. And I was just very proud to represent 308 the last couple weeks.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Jared, Allie? Okay. All right, now we'll have 8.2 Board Committee Reports.
I have some comments. I'm sorry, I thought you were starting with them.
Oh, no, I said anyone else, and then, okay, go ahead.
You said anyone else. I thought you were speaking to them because I didn't finish with that. So yesterday I had the opportunity to attend the U.S. Navy Band concert that they offered for free at OEHS. It was pretty packed, I must say, and it was an opportunity for anyone in our community to see for free professional musicians and singers that gave a show that I don't think our gym has quite ever seen the quality of before in 15 years. It was pretty amazing to have that just hanging out on a Sunday afternoon for anyone who wanted to attend. So I wanted to thank Mr. Rexroth for bringing them here. It was definitely a one-of-a-kind kind of situation for the whole community, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's what I've got. I'm gonna leave the rest for conversation later.
Okay. Did they answer? Jared, Allie, anything for board comments?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Now we'll go on to 8.2, board committee reports. We'll start with the equity committee.
Okay, we met on April 12th. Renee Sartor, the Director of EL Services, shared a draft presentation with the committee. Final version will be shared with the entire board soon. Committee gave feedback regarding parent communications, special education amongst our EL population, the need for EL services to be considered in all hiring and other decisions. But she'll be presenting that to the entire board soon. So.
Okay, thank you. Now the Finance and Facilities Committee report.
Sure. We met on April 19th. Fun fact that was mentioned is that we have over 3 million square feet of space in the district, which just blows me away. But that's a lot of space that our facilities team does a phenomenal job at managing. We talked about just some standards of how they use and what they do in regards to cleaning and using green products and all of the guidelines that go along with that. We talked about ADA compliance, and we even talked about facility rental income and even the process of what comes in and how is that managed and how it can even be consolidated. We talked extensively about student fees and the process by which they are collected and the utilization of push coin. We did go over the Envision 308 maintenance plan, talked a little bit about Kluber and even how the central office, and just even talked about how we can utilize the central office staff in order to address some of the needs that are in the building. And then lastly, we also discussed our financial projections for fiscal year 2023 and in detail in regards to basically everything that we talked about the last board meeting. So we just had a passionate, very interesting conversation, and I just love all the input from everybody on that committee.
Okay, thank you very much. And last, teaching and learning.
Teaching and Learning Committee met on April 20th. Renee shared a presentation with that committee as well on EL services. Discussed the growing population of students, the need to track student progress over the years, even after they're no longer considered EL students. Again, she'll be presenting that to the entire board very soon. And then there's nothing really up to say. Faith also presented professional development progress report. So, and that was presented 15 minutes ago.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to 9.1, consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Any questions on the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 9.1 minutes from the Board of Education meeting on April 11th, 2022, open and closed session, and 9.2 to acknowledge the FOIA request received by the district.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
No lights.
Oh, they're gone.
off and see if Jared had anything to
I'm
add to
surprised
the
he didn't
committee.
text someone and say, hey. We're- Someone text Ally and say, we're getting you back. Hello? We lost you. Okay.
Just tell her to wait.
What's that?
Just wait, okay.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'll be glad when you got all that up in the room.
I was thinking the same thing.
Technology is good when it's good. When it's
I'm
not.
really sorry.
It's okay. All right. Okay, do we need to do it again? Do we need to do it again? Okay, so, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 9.1, minutes from the Board of Education meeting on April 11th, 2022, open and closed session, and 9.2, to acknowledge the FOIA request received by the district.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 10.1, approval of the student rights and responsibilities section in the student handbook. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the student rights and responsibilities section in the student handbook as presented.
Second.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton? Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Item 10.2, student disciplinary case. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to expel student 2021-22-5 through the first semester of the 2023-2024 school year, pursuant to the board's written findings and decision as discussed in closed session, with a review by the district's alternative education coordinator in the spring of 2023, who is authorized to consider returning the student to goal at the beginning of the 23-24 school year, based on the student's successful progress in the areas of behavior, including police involvement, attendance, and grades. The alternative education coordinator shall provide a status report to the Board of Education at that time.
Second.
Ms. Doyle?
I'm going to abstain.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton? Aye. Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Motion passes 6 with 1 abstention. 10.3, approval of Board of Education meeting dates 2022-2023. I make a motion to postpone item 10.3 until our May 9th meeting. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Ms. Simulton? Aye. Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 10.4, approval of destruction of the audio recordings. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the destruction of audio recordings of the closed session meetings from April 27th, 2020 through October 13th, 2020.
Second. Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
No.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
No.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye. Motion passes 5 to 2. 10.5, approval of the release of those closed session minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to make available no closed session minutes at this time due to a determination that it continues to be necessary to protect the public interest or the privacy of an individual by keeping them confidential.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. 10.6, approval of 2022-23 administrator contracts. Can I have a motion, please?
I would like to make two motions. The first motion, I make a motion to approve the building administrator contracts as presented in closed session.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
No.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
This is
The
building.
building.
Thank you. This is the building. Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
I make a motion to approve the district administration contracts as presented in closed session.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
No.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
No.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-2. 10.7, approval of personnel report. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
No.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I
All
ma-
in favor?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.